Shadows trailed across the holographic map in the command center, revealing a stretch of contested territory that had remained unchanged for centuries. 4 star systems, each quarreling with the others over resources, historical entities, and overlapping claims. Generations had perished trying to challenge these borders or guard them. Entire civilizations were shaped by these seemingly endless struggles. Yet lingering at the edge of this stalemate was hope, carried in the shape of a newly anointed peacekeeping force, predominantly led by humans. They had arrived, offering fresh perspectives and methods no one had ever tried before. Colonel Miriam Sines studied the flickering map, memorizing every boundary line, the names of every faction and every planet. Though she bore the traditional uniform of the Interstellar Harmony Agency, there was something in her eyes that betrayed the weight of her responsibilities. Humanity was a relative newcomer to the galactic stage, but within a few short decades its leaders had proven adept at forging alliances and diffusing crises. Now they were entrusted with one of the greatest tasks in known space, to end wars that had endured for generations without resolution. The luminous star lines glowed upon her face as she closed the projection. A hush fell over the command center. The representatives of the 4 warring civilizations stood around a circular table, each grim-faced, each determined not to yield. Off to the side, 2 men and 1 woman in the same uniform as Miriam, ready to oversee the negotiations. Their ranks varied. Some were seasoned diplomats, others were newly promoted, but all were specially chosen not only for their background in diplomacy, but also for their empathy and adaptability. Miriam felt a subtle quiver in her chest, a reminder of the anxiety that often accompanied her. She was charged with preventing bloodshed on a scale that dwarfed any single planet's conflict. A representative from the Borali Dominion, tall and severe, spoke first. Transparent membranes around his jaw shimmered with tension whenever he raised his voice. "We are not here," he intoned, "to see our territory stolen. We are here to ensure formal recognition that the Zalori Federation's expansion is illegal. We have been living under their shadow for too long." His eyes flicked to the Zalori ambassador, who clicked her mandibles in protest. Representative Halren of the Zalori Federation hissed in response. "We expand only to reclaim what was ours millennia ago. The Dominion, in its arrogance, seized resources that were discovered by our ancestors." Miriam raised a hand calmly. "We humbly ask for your patience. Everyone will be given due time to speak their claims." Her voice faltered for a moment at the memory of the logs she'd studied, each chronicling unrelenting hostilities between these races. She had read accounts of entire planets scorched, station battles fought over asteroids containing precious metals or fueling compounds. She had learned of betrayals, of treaties made, then broken, within a single generation. Soft footsteps approached from behind, and Lieutenant Kaito Lee stepped forward with a datapad. His calm manner was matched by a clear, confident voice. "We've compiled an interlinked database of historical documents and prior treaties. If both the Borali Dominion and the Zalori Federation accept, we would like to bring up certain mutually agreed statements from the past as possible frameworks for a new understanding." Still glaring at each other, the Borali and Zalori representatives gave short nods. On the opposite side of the table, delegates from the Aulic Concord and the Tharn Collective exchanged cold stares. The Aulic had a monolithic, stoic nature, large eyes set deep in elongated skulls. Their standing grievance with the Tharn was a dispute dating back hundreds of years, lands, religious sites, and deeply entrenched cultural memory. Each side refused to budge, convinced that any concession would disgrace the memory of their forebears. They managed to remain silent, but their hostility was plain in every twitch of their limbs. Miriam felt a sharp tension in the air. Negotiation was rarely linear in these settings. She sighed inwardly, recalling how in Earth's own history peace often emerged not solely from reason, but from exhaustion, heartbreak, and the courage to choose reconciliation over revenge. Her team had seen successes on smaller scales among younger civilizations, where grudges were not yet centuries old and alliances were simpler to establish. But these four powers had known each other for so long that entire legends, myths, and traditions were founded in mutual hostility. That day's session was long, marked by the repetitive dance of blame and counter-blame. The newly arrived humans employed a strategy that was often misunderstood at first: active listening. They allowed the delegates to speak their anger and grief out loud, as carefully and thoroughly as they wished. No interruption came from the peacekeepers. Occasionally, one of the humans would paraphrase an especially raw statement, bridging a piece of complicated rhetoric into simpler terms. The delegates were unused to sincerity of this kind, feeling disarmed in the face of patience. No immediate breakthroughs came, but cracks appeared in the walls of hostility. In the nights that followed, the team would reconvene in a smaller chamber, reviewing the day's interactions. Miriam and her officers would share quick updates on any sign of a softened stance. If a Barali delegate so much as hesitated in condemning a Zalori for an ancient slight, that was progress. Diplomatic achievements in these long-standing conflicts weren't measured in dramatic capitulations, but in subtle acknowledgments of a shared humanity, or rather, a willingness to coexist in peace. A few weeks in, the impetus for change came not in the form of an interstellar crisis, but in an unassuming snippet of data. A monitoring post near the demilitarized region of the Eliktharn border discovered a drifting medical vessel, adrift beyond the gravitational pull of either side. The short distress call indicated the ship was caught in a lethal malfunction in an older system that might explode if not neutralized soon. The Ulik blamed the Thorn for sabotaging it, and the Thorn doubted it was even Ulik in origin. Colonel Sines realized the potential for a demonstration of unity. She proposed that a joint rescue crew, comprised of Ulik and Tharn, with human oversight, attempt to board the helpless ship and save any survivors. Down in the docking bay, under the neon glow of the station's overhead lights, a provisional team formed: 2, Ulik, 3, Tharn, and Lieutenant Kato Lee. All had volunteered, though none found it comfortable to work side by side. The Ulik were proud but exchanged curt, almost scornful glances with their Tharn counterparts. The Tharn exuded a sense of coiled tension, always ready to interpret the Ulik's next word or gesture as a slight. Kato, wearing a serene expression, ushered them all into the heavily shielded shuttle, explaining the roles of each member before they launched. It was the first time these two sides had worked in harmony in a very long while. The drifting medical vessel was a pitiful sight, its hull battered by unknown debris, power fluctuations highlighting the corridors in a sickly, stuttering glow. The air recyclers inside functioned sporadically, and even the onboard computers flickered under the strain of failing systems. They located the surviving crew members quickly: 3 Ulik and 2 Tharn, all mostly unconscious, suffering from oxygen deprivation. It was a strange heartbreak to see both species slumped together on the brink of death, differences forgotten in the face of shared mortality. The joint rescue party sealed their suits, forging a corridor of pressurized air, and carried the wounded carefully back to the shuttle. This single mission passed without violence or sabotage. Kaito took note of the shared relief in every face as they flew back to the station. When the Eolic and Tharn ambassadors learned of the successful rescue, it struck them more profoundly than any treaty or debate. The rescue party seemed to have forced them all to reconsider, even if faintly, the possibility of cooperation. It was one thing to hear about altruism in a negotiation room. It was quite another to watch members of their own species saved by the combined effort of an alleged adversary. Miriam seized on this moment, encouraging both ambassadors to make public statements of gratitude. She pressed for an immediate humanitarian corridor in the disputed zone, structured under the Peacekeepers' supervision, to safely transport medical supplies to either side. The other half of the theater was less promising. The Borali and Zaluri continued to clash, especially over a star lane known as the Tachori Passage. An essential route connecting major trade hubs, it had been a constant source of friction. With each passing day, tensions rose. Despite the calmer approach to negotiations, the Barbie remarks never ceased. In private, some of the Borali delegates insulted humanity's naivety. They think they can solve everything by talking, they sneered. They have no idea of the ancient betrayals. Meanwhile, the Zalori's frustration grew at what they perceived as the peacekeepers' reluctance to hold the Borali fully accountable. Hints of resumed military buildup on both sides began to seep through intelligence channels. Miriam found herself immersed in messages from other corners of the galaxy. Despite the Alliance's best efforts, not all powers welcomed the emergence of humans as pacifiers. Outsiders referred to it as manipulative grandstanding. Still others accused Earth of meddling. But the starting seeds of trust they had sown among the Eilish and Tharn propelled the mission forward. She refused to abandon the cause. Even when exhaustion weighed on her mind, Earth had known war too. For centuries, humans had inflicted harm upon each other. But across those difficult times, pockets of perseverance, empathy, and unity had prevailed. Those pockets were now what they sought to share with the galaxy. A sign appeared on a hazy morning of the station cycle. At a small, neutral gathering, a young Zalori envoy approached a Borali counterpart and offered him a sealed memory crystal. The Zalori explained that it contained the earliest known genealogical records of an entire Borali clan believed extinct. This clan, rumor said, had once sought unity with the Zalori. "We discovered this in our archives," the envoy explained, shifting anxiously. "It was wrong of us to keep it hidden. Perhaps it can help you reclaim some lost heritage." The Borali, stunned into silence, accepted the small glittering artifact, his membranes fluttering with unsteady breath. Despite centuries of animosity, that single gesture opened a conversation that led to an invitation. A private meeting, away from the noise of the official negotiations. The humans quietly facilitated it, racing to provide a discreet and respectful atmosphere. Colonel Cyans, with Kaito Lee and a few other peacekeepers, observed from behind the tinted glass of an upper balcony. What they witnessed was delicately hopeful. The two delegates, once glowering enemies, speaking in hushed voices about an overlap in their histories that neither had previously acknowledged. Interstitial breakthroughs appeared in unexpected ways. The once deafening aggression yielded moments of reflection. And then came the impetus that forced a decision on all parties. Rumors of a powerful outside threat. No one knew its origin precisely, only that entire freighters had vanished on the distant edges of Tharn territory. Stories circulated about a new force, a group of technologically advanced raiders, or something far more ominous, the ramifications of an undisclosed, formidable adversary, shattered a complacency among the four powers. Each civilization realized that if they remained immersed in their internal feuds, they might be left vulnerable to a looming devastation no single side could handle alone. Station sensors picked up faint but worrying signals, unidentified vessels prowling in the outskirts of the quadrant, sometimes vanishing behind cosmic phenomena. The tension that once seemed endless between the four ancient rivals now found itself confronted with a universal question of survival. Miriam and her team extended an urgent invitation. We must stand together or risk our downfall alone. The delegates clashed with their instincts of suspicion, but the fear of a hidden and possibly unstoppable enemy started to overshadow old grudges. In the corridors of the battered station, a new set of discussions commenced. The humans presented projected scenarios of invasion, assimilation, or resource plundering by this unknown outsider. They laid out strategic plans for coordinating defense fleets, sharing intel, and establishing a combined command center. Their approach was inclusive, never prescriptive. They recognized the pride of each civilization and gave them space to shape the cooperative measures. The Ulig provided advanced sensor net technology. The Tharn contributed a sophisticated stealth defensive system. The Borali offered their powerful, warp-capable capital ships, and the Zalori contributed their expertise in fast assembling orbital structures. Over a series of intense days, the delegates found themselves collaborating in labs, drafting frameworks for mutual defense. Each faction, kept in check by the neutral presence of humans, revealed glimpses of trust. There were still disagreements. The Tharn argued about the chain of command, while the Eolik demanded recognition of their leadership in intelligence gathering. The Borali and Zalori disputed over staging areas and routes to be used. But for once, the argument wasn't about undermining each other. It was about forging a unity, however fragile, in the face of the unknown. Into this precarious moment stepped Colonel Sines, standing at the central dais in a newly configured assembly hall. She waited for silence to settle among the delegates. "We have reached a crossroads," she said. "You have each endured unimaginable tragedies at the hands of one another. Your histories are filled with sorrow and betrayal, and I can't pretend that pain is simple to bury. But in confronting this new threat, we must learn to see one another not as threats, but as allies." A hush followed her words. She continued, aware of her heartbeat thrumming in her throat. "We humans came into this galaxy without centuries of baggage with any of you. We fought our own wars, made our own mistakes, and lost countless lives. But we discovered that empathy can sometimes be more powerful than fear. We are here to share that hope and that conviction with you. If we can stand united today, perhaps that unity can become tomorrow's foundation. Maybe, just maybe, we can end these cycles of hostilities once and for all." Silence filled the hall. Delegates eyed one another, uncertain but drawn by the sincerity they witnessed in Miriam's team. The distant, unconfirmed threat loomed above them all. In the end, the ambassadors stood and lifted their hands or equivalent appendages, consenting to an alliance of sorts, a joint defense initiative. Teams worked feverishly in the following days to calibrate the station's scanners to a much farther range, hoping to detect any sign of the rumored enemy. Squadrons made up of multi-species crews began trial patrols, some with Aeolic and Tharn working side by side, others featuring Borali and Zalori in a mix. These early exercises were edgy. Tense stares, whispered warnings, deeply internalized grudges. Yet, surprisingly, no physical confrontation erupted. In no time, they made contact. Automated border sensors picked up a cluster of abnormal signals just beyond the Aurulis Nebula. A combined fleet, part of the new alliance, set out to investigate, and Colonel Sines departed as the commanding officer, joining the bridge of the Li Borlari cruiser. The interior of that cruiser was an edifice of advanced technology, shaped by centuries of refining heavier-than-light travel. Human advisors worked the sensor arrays, while Zalari specialists gathered data from the swirling cosmic dust. Tharn soldiers guarded crucial compartments, and Eolik tacticians set up real-time analysis of potential infiltration methods. When the unknown force emerged through the nebula's perimeter, the entire Alliance fleet tensed. A cluster of spiky, obsidian-like vessels streaked forward, destroying an uninhabited outpost in a single pass. Their engines radiated an alien signature never before catalogued. In reaction, multiple Alliance ships formed a defensive net. The synergy was surprisingly swift. Eolik sensor grids guided the Borali dreadnoughts, while Zalori quickburst fighters harassed the intruders. Tharn stealth craft moved in arcs behind them, feeding critical targeting coordinates to the rest of the fleet. The humans offered tactical oversight, orchestrating a synergy that none of these races had attempted together. An intense battle flared across the starry void. Blinding lances of plasma hammered hulls, shields flickered and collapsed. The enemy craft, well-armed and fearless, pressed each advantage they found. Yet what might have once been four fractured groups fought now as if with a single mind, covering each other's vulnerabilities. On the bridge, Colonel Sines directed the formation fluidly, orchestrating retreats and flanking runs with precision. The ghostly flower of explosions pulsated in the vacuum as the obsidian ships one by one succumbed to the Alliance's coordinated maneuvers. Sifting through wreckage after the battle, salvage teams discovered a wealth of unidentifiable technology. Some small pods contained remains that suggested a previously unencountered species. Though no conclusive data was gathered on their origin, what was certain, however, was that if the ragged divisions among the Alliance had continued unabated, they would never have coordinated so effectively. The new unity had saved them. News of the Alliance victory resonated back at the station. For the first time in generations, celebrations occurred simultaneously among the Barali, Zalori, Iulik, and Tharn. Commemorations of the brave, ceremonies for the fallen, expressions of relief that they could finally look outward instead of constantly glancing at each other with suspicion. Representatives from each civilization gathered under a newly crafted banner, designed collaboratively to symbolize unity. Miriam watched the unveiling quietly, her heart filled with cautious optimism. Having experienced triumph in battle together, the four societies decided to formalize a larger treaty. A new confederation was envisioned, tentatively named the Celestial Accord. The humans were invited to serve as mediators and advisors, not to overshadow or impose, but to ensure that the precious and fragile peace not disintegrate. Over a marathon of drafting sessions, the delegates hammered out trade routes under equal oversight, resource-sharing laws, and a set of conflict resolution protocols designed to dissuade aggression. Weapons limitations were drafted, still minimal at first, but it was a giant leap forward for civilizations that had known nothing but arms races for so long. A signing ceremony was planned at the station's grand atrium, a vast space that once displayed only the flags of separate powers. Now it featured a luminous mosaic representing the unity of four worlds. One by one, the delegates approached a table at the center, graced by an ornate pedestal containing a central data core. Each official or ambassador placed their personal encryption key into the data core, indicating consent to the new covenant. An official from the Interstellar Harmony Agency, a tall woman with silver streaks in her hair, read out each clause in the shared language, and the crowd listened solemnly. When the final key was inserted, a holographic flourish bloomed overhead, marking the infancy of a grand alliance. Colonel Sen saw tears glistening in the eyes of a junior Tharn officer who had lost family decades ago in a Borali attack. She noticed the slight trembling in a Borali envoy's membranes, once racked with hatred for the Zalori, now signing a pact of friendship. This was the victory for which she and her team had toiled. Not the dogfight among the stars, but the forging of mutual respect on this battered station. Late into that evening, after the dignitaries retired, she and Lieutenant Lee took a quiet stroll through the station's corridor. Government seals and flags fluttered in digital displays. The gloom that once hung in these halls seemed lighter. "Do you think it will last?" she asked, adjusting the collar of her uniform. Kaito responded thoughtfully, "Peace is never guaranteed. It needs daily renewal, just like trust. But they're on their path now, and maybe that's enough for the first steps." They reached a viewport that revealed the star-flecked void. Tiny silhouettes of Allied cruisers passed by on their patrol rotations. Miriam watched them with a sense of pride, tempered by humility. Perhaps there would be challenges. Old hatreds welled in some hearts, and political friction would remain for decades to come. But she believed in the foundation laid here. That empathy and dialogue, supported by an unwavering commitment to fairness, could endure despite centuries of rage. Already, the newly formed Celestial Accord was planning a joint expedition to investigate the origin of the mysterious attackers. Barali dreadnoughts, Zaloria scouts, Ulik sensor ships, and Tharn infiltration units would depart at dawn under a unified command. Instead of rallying for war against each other, they rallied for mutual discovery. The thick wrought iron of suspicion had cracked, letting in a small beam of hope. Miriam Saenz felt a sense of awe. Humanity, once overshadowed by its own internal wars and petty distinctions back on Earth, had somehow found in the stars a shared calling. To be the peacemakers of a galaxy scarred by feuds far older than human history. She took a long, thoughtful breath, the flicker of starlight radiating against the reflection of her uniform. She remembered how her ancestors so often failed to keep peace on their own planet, yet here she was, leading a change centuries in the making. She and her fellow humans did not wield the largest fleets or the most formidable weapons. They brought ideals, empathy, and an unyielding resolve to bridge divides. That, it seemed, was enough to start rewriting histories. She placed a hand on the glass, feeling the humming vibrations of the station's life support systems through her fingertips. Somewhere out there, new threats undoubtedly waited. But for the moment, centuries-old adversaries were signing treaties instead of exchanging fire. Determined to hold on to that fragile unity, Colonel Miriam Saenz made a silent vow to continue guiding them, step by careful step, into a future defined not by their bloodshed but by their collective promise to preserve peace.